This is HOA checkmate. And I was done being polite. I was standing in my backyard at 8:30 on a Tuesday night when Shirley Nelson shoved a laminated pool safety checklist in my face and told me I was running a party house. She was already yelling before I even opened the gate. You need to shut that heater down right now. It is violating noise ordinances, and I have documented complaints. If you do not comply immediately, the board will fine you $500 per day starting tomorrow. I work in logistics. I moved to Sunridge Meadows Association in Denver, Colorado, because I wanted a quiet neighborhood and a fresh start. The HOA here treats backyard amenities like contraband, but I thought a pool heater would be fine since I had it permitted and inspected. I was wrong. Shirley is a board member who runs the portal like a courtroom, and she was standing on my patio in a sunset orange jacket with her phone camera pointed at my hot tub like she was documenting a crime scene. My ability to avoid a lien that could hurt my credit was on the line, and she was not backing down. I said I have the permits. The city approved everything. She cut me off. We protect property values. The photos do not lie. She turned her phone screen toward me and I saw a portal post with my address in the title and a blurry night photo of steam rising from my backyard. The caption said ongoing noise violation and late night gatherings. I felt my stomach drop. I said I do not have gatherings. I heat the pool for myself. She tapped the laminated checklist. This clearly states that any mechanical equipment audible beyond property lines requires board pre-approval. You installed this heater without submitting the form. I said I submitted it to the city, and they signed off. She said the city is not the HOA. You bypassed our process, and now you are in violation. I am filing a formal complaint tonight, and the fines start at midnight. She turned and walked out through my gate before I could say another word. I went inside and opened the portal. The post was already live. 23 comments, most of them piling on. Someone said they heard music last weekend. Someone else said they saw cars parked on the street. None of it was true. I have not had anyone over in weeks. The heater runs quiet. I checked the spec sheet, and it is rated at 42 decibels, which is quieter than a normal conversation. I took screenshots of the permit approval emails and the city inspection confirmation. I drafted a reply on the portal explaining that the work was permitted and the noise claim was false. I hit submit and refreshed. My reply was gone. I tried again. Same thing. I checked the portal rules and saw a note at the bottom. Board members may moderate posts to maintain community standards. Shirley had deleted my response. I called the management company the next morning. The woman on the phone said Shirley had filed a complaint and the violation was logged. I asked to see the complaint. She said it was confidential. I said, how can I respond if I do not know what I am responding to? She said I could request a hearing, but I would need to pay the first fine before the appeal would be processed. I said, that is insane. She said, those are the rules. I hung up and pulled up the county permit portal. I downloaded every email, every approval notice, every inspection report. I had a city inspector who had signed off on the heater installation and the electrical work. His name was Greg Alvarez, and he had been out twice. I called his office and left a message asking if he could confirm the work met code. By noon, I had 3 more portal posts about me. One said I was ignoring board communications. Another said my heater was a safety hazard. A third included a photo of my backyard fence with a caption asking if I had approval for the gate latch modification. I did not modify the latch. Shirley was everywhere in the comments. We protect property values. The photos do not lie. I wanted to scream. I checked my email and saw a message from an attorney whose name was on the HOA letterhead. It was copied to Shirley and the management company. The subject line said demand for immediate compliance. The body said I was required to pay the $500 fine within 7 days, or the board would proceed with collections and a lien filing. It also said I could not appeal until the fine was paid in full. I felt the walls closing in. I sent Greg Alvarez another message and asked him to call me as soon as possible. He called back 20 minutes later. I explained the situation. He said the heater met all city noise and electrical standards, and he had the inspection records to prove it. I asked if he could send me a letter confirming that. He said he could do better. He said he would come to the hearing if I needed him. I said I do not even have a hearing scheduled yet. He said get one scheduled and let me know. I thanked him and hung up. I felt a tiny bit of hope for the first time in 2 days. I submitted a hearing request through the portal. Shirley responded within an hour. She said the next available hearing slot was in 3 weeks. I said the fines start at midnight and I cannot afford delays. She said the board meets on a fixed schedule, and there are no exceptions. I pulled up the bylaws and found a section that said emergency hearings could be requested for disputes involving immediate financial harm. I cited it in a follow-up message. Shirley replied 10 minutes later and said the board had reviewed my request and scheduled an emergency hearing for Friday at 6 p.m. in the clubhouse conference room. She also said I was still required to pay the outstanding fine before the hearing, or my appeal would be dismissed. I did not pay. I was not going to give her a dime until I had my day in front of the board. Thursday afternoon, I got another email. The subject line said, "Final demand." Shirley had copied the same attorney and the management company. The message said the board was proceeding with collections and court action if I did not pay the fine and remove the heater by Friday morning. It also said the hearing time had been moved to 7 p.m. due to scheduling conflicts. I felt my chest tighten. The hearing time gets moved at the last minute, and I cannot afford delays. I forwarded the email to Greg and asked if he was still available at 7. He said he was. I printed every permit email, every inspection confirmation, every code reference I could find. I loaded it all into a folder and put my laptop in a bag. I was ready. Friday evening, I walked into the clubhouse conference room at 6:50. Shirley was already there in her sunset orange blazer, sitting at the head of the table with the laminated pool safety checklist laid out in front of her. 2 other board members were beside her. I sat down across from them. Shirley started without waiting. "You are here because you installed a pool heater without HOA approval, and you have ignored repeated warnings to shut it down. The board has documented noise complaints and photographic evidence. You are in violation of Section 12.4 of the Community Standards." I said I have city permits and inspection records that prove the heater meets all applicable codes. She cut me off. "The city is not the HOA. We have our own standards." I said I would like to present my evidence. She said you can present after we review the complaint. She pulled out her phone and opened the portal. She read the original post out loud, including the comments. She read the follow-up posts. She showed the photos. She said the pattern was clear. Then she said the board had received multiple complaints from neighbors about late-night noise and activity. I asked to see the complaints. She said they were confidential to protect the complainants. I said, how can I respond if I do not know who is complaining or what they are claiming? She said the photos do not lie. That was the second time she had used that line. I made a mental note. I opened my laptop and pulled up the permit office emails. I said I have confirmation from the city that the heater was inspected and approved. The noise rating is 42 decibels. That is quieter than a conversation. Shirley said the city approval does not override HOA rules. You were required to submit a mechanical equipment form and you did not. I said I can prove the work was approved and inspected. I have the inspector here tonight. Greg Alvarez walked in right on cue. He was in a city jacket with an ID badge. He nodded at me and sat down beside me. Shirley looked annoyed. She said this is a closed hearing. Greg said I am here as a technical witness to confirm code compliance. Shirley said we do not need a city inspector to tell us what our own standards say. Greg said I reviewed the standards you cited. Section 12.4 does not say what you claim it says. The room went quiet. I felt a jolt of energy. Greg pulled out a printed copy of the HOA standards and flipped to Section 12.4. He read it out loud. Any mechanical equipment that produces noise in excess of 60 decibels as measured at the property line requires board pre-approval. He looked at Shirley. The heater is rated at 42 decibels. It does not meet the threshold. Shirley said we have complaints. Greg said complaints are not measurements. Do you have a decibel reading? She did not answer. I said I can prove selective enforcement. Shirley cut me off. That is not relevant to this hearing. I said it is absolutely relevant. I opened a second tab on my laptop and pulled up the portal edit history. I had screenshots showing that Shirley had deleted my replies and edited timestamps on her own posts. I turned the laptop toward the board. I said she has been manipulating the portal to control the narrative. One of the other board members leaned forward. He said, "Is that true?" Shirley said I was removing spam. I said my replies were not spam. They were factual responses with permit documentation. You deleted them because they contradicted your narrative. The board member said we need to see those screenshots. I turned the laptop fully toward them and walked them through the edit history. Every deleted reply, every timestamp change, every moderation flag. Shirley was silent. I said I also have a permit confirmation that proves the work was approved and inspected before I even turned the heater on. I pulled up the final inspection email and read the exact standards excerpt. Greg added that he had personally signed off on the installation, and the noise profile was well within city and HOA limits. He said if the board wanted to challenge that, they would need to provide their own decibel measurements. Shirley did not have any. The twist landed hard. The standard Karen cited does not say what she claims, and the narrative collapses. The board member who had leaned forward said, "I think we need to table this until we can review the documentation." Shirley said we have a violation on record, and fines are accumulating. The board member said the violation is based on a standard that does not apply. We cannot fine someone for being under the threshold. Shirley tried to argue, but the other board member cut her off. He said, "I agree. This needs to be reviewed. We should reverse the fines and close the complaint." Shirley looked like she had been hit with a brick. She said we protect property values. The board member said property values are not an excuse for selective enforcement. The meeting ended 5 minutes later. The board voted to reverse the fines with all fees refunded. Shirley left without saying another word. I walked out of the clubhouse with Greg. He said, "You handled that well." I said I could not have done it without you. He said, "Anytime. Just keep your permits in order and you will be fine." I thanked him again and drove home. I sat in my car for a minute before going inside. My hands were shaking. I had been so close to a lien, to collections, to a hit on my credit, all because Shirley decided my pool heater was a problem. I went inside and opened the portal. The original post was still up, but Shirley had not added any new comments. I posted a short update explaining that the board had reversed the violation and confirming that the heater met all applicable standards. I did not gloat. I just stated the facts. The comments started coming in. A few people apologized. A few others said they had been targeted by Shirley too. One neighbor sent me a private message asking how I got the edit history screenshots. I told her where to find the portal logs. The next week, the management company sent me a formal letter confirming that the fines had been reversed and my account was clear. Shirley did not post on the portal for 10 days. When she finally did, it was about trash can placement. The tone was different. She was not as aggressive. I think the board had a conversation with her. I do not know for sure. I kept the permit emails and the inspection reports in a folder on my desktop. I also kept the screenshots of the portal edits, just in case. A month later, I was heating the pool on a Saturday night when my neighbor from 2 doors down knocked on the gate. He said he heard what happened with Shirley. He said he had been fighting her over a patio cover for 6 months. She claimed he needed a variance even though the cover was under the height limit. He asked if I still had the inspector's contact information. I gave him Greg's number. He thanked me and said he was going to request his own hearing. I said good luck. He said I appreciate you standing up to her. It made a difference. I started to realize that Shirley had been running the same playbook on multiple people. Selective enforcement, confidential complaints, deleted portal replies. The laminated pool safety checklist was just one tool in a larger system. She used the bylaws like a weapon and the portal like a gavel. But the system only worked if no one pushed back. The moment I brought receipts and an expert witness, it fell apart. The board had to choose between backing her up or admitting the process was broken. They chose the latter. I do not think Shirley expected that. 3 months later, the HOA held elections. Shirley ran for president. She lost. A new candidate won on a platform of transparency and fair enforcement. The first thing the new board did was update the portal moderation policy. Board members could no longer delete replies without logging a reason. All complaints had to include measurable evidence. The laminated pool safety checklist stayed on the clubhouse wall, but it was updated to reflect the actual standards. I saw Shirley at the pool once after the election. She was checking gate locks. She did not say anything to me. I did not say anything to her. We just existed in the same space for a minute and then moved on. I kept heating my pool. I kept my permits updated. I kept the screenshots. I also started attending board meetings. Not every month, but enough to stay informed. I learned the bylaws inside and out. I learned which board members were reasonable and which ones followed Shirley's playbook. I learned that the best defense was not silence. It was documentation. Every email, every inspection, every conversation. I learned that HOAs could be fought if you had the evidence and the patience to see it through. The neighbor with the patio cover won his hearing. He used the same strategy. Permits, inspector, receipts. The board reversed his violation too. Another neighbor fought a landscaping complaint the same way. The pattern was clear. Shirley's era of unchecked enforcement was over. The new board was not perfect, but they were better. They asked for evidence. They followed their own rules. They did not delete replies. I think about that first night a lot. Shirley standing on my patio with the laminated checklist telling me the photos do not lie. She was so confident. She had run that play 100 times and it had always worked. But this time it did not. This time I had Greg. I had the permits. I had the edit history. I had the patience to sit through a hearing and the guts to call her out in front of the board. And when the moment came, the standard she cited did not say what she claimed. The whole thing collapsed. If you want to hear more HOA stories like this, hit the like button and subscribe. I still heat my pool. I still use the hot tub. I still live in Sunridge Meadows. The HOA is still here. Shirley is still on the board, just not in charge anymore. The portal is still active. The clubhouse still has the laminated checklist on the wall. But the rules are clearer now. The process is fairer. And I know exactly what to do if someone tries to pull the same stunt again. I learned that HOAs are not inherently broken. They are only as good or as bad as the people running them. Shirley weaponized the system because no one had challenged her. The moment someone did, the system corrected itself. Not perfectly, not instantly, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to protect my credit, my property, and my peace of mind. Enough to give other neighbors the courage to fight back when their turn came. The heater still runs at 42 decibels. The pool still steams on cold nights. The gate still latches the same way it always did. But now I have a folder on my desktop labeled HOA documentation, and it has everything I need if this ever happens again. Permits. Emails. Inspection reports. Screenshots. Greg's contact info. The bylaws. The standards. The appeals process. All of it. Because the next time someone shows up with a laminated checklist and a phone camera, I will be ready. I ran into the neighbor with the patio cover at the grocery store last month. He told me he was planning to install a fire pit. He said he already got the permits and scheduled the inspection. He said he learned from watching my fight. I told him that was the whole point. We do not have to accept selective enforcement. We do not have to pay fines for rules that do not exist. We just have to show up with evidence and refuse to back down. He said he was glad someone finally stood up to Shirley. I said I was just protecting my investment. But the truth is, it felt bigger than that. It felt like reclaiming a piece of control in a system designed to take it away. I think about the moment Greg read Section 12.4 out loud and Shirley went silent. I think about the board member who said property values are not an excuse for selective enforcement. I think about the email that said the fines were reversed with all fees refunded. Those moments mattered. They changed the trajectory. They proved that documentation beats bluster every time. They proved that HOAs can be held accountable if you know the rules better than they do. I still see Shirley at HOA events. She still carries the laminated pool safety checklist. She still posts on the portal. But she does not come to my house anymore. She does not delete my replies. She does not threaten fines she cannot back up. Because she knows I have the receipts. She knows I have Greg's number. She knows I will show up to every hearing with a laptop and a folder full of permits. And she knows the board will not back her up if the evidence is not there. That is the lesson. The HOA is not unbeatable. It is just a system run by people, and people make mistakes. People overreach. People assume no one will fight back. But when you do fight back with facts, with inspectors, with bylaws in hand, the system has to respond. It does not always respond the way you want. It does not always respond fast. But it responds. And sometimes, that is enough. I heat my pool on cold nights and I do not think about Shirley anymore. I think about the neighbors who reached out after the hearing. I think about the board members who voted to reverse the fines. I think about Greg showing up in his city jacket and reading the standards out loud. I think about the moment the narrative collapsed and the truth won. That is what I hold on to. Not the anger, not the stress, not the fear of a lien. Just the simple fact that I stood my ground and it worked. The fines are gone. The violation is closed. The heater runs quiet. The pool is warm. And I am still here. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.